Kissing Tulips, Part 7. The whole of the afternoon I am in a terrible state of distress. My mind was reeling so that selecting a dress from my wardrobe proved to be more difficult a task than usual. The sight of the crucifix around my neck confirmed that last night had not been a dream after all. I had gone to the Nag's Head and met that mysterious stranger. I had gone to Marianne's grave and seen her walking again, alive but horribly altered. The only thing I couldn't piece together was how I had ended up in my own room after I had so clearly fainted dead away in the graveyard. I tried to come up with some explanation, but each was more improbable than the next. The not knowing was beginning to drive me absolutely mad, and I had to press my hands firmly against my skirt to keep from wringing them so hard. There was nothing left for it. When night came on again, I must go back to Marianne's grave. If she was still there, then I would know that what I had seen was not, in fact, a hoax. But even as I think this, there is a terrible pounding in my ears, and I know that I am still too frightened to leave the house to even consider going back to the graveyard. What if Marianne is still there, waiting for me, waiting to finish the job she had begun when she caught me lurking by her grave? I had escaped last night, and even that was a mystery to me. Someone else had been there, had kept Marianne's monstrous visage at bay. But who could it have been? Whoever they were, I owed them my life, and more than that, they had seen what had become of my sister. Perhaps they would know a way to save her and put an end to that terrible state she agonized in. The thought momentarily calms me, until I realize that I have no way of knowing who it was that saved me. Maybe they had already put an end to Marianne's suffering. But then, how would you kill someone who has died once already? There is another knock on my door, and my thoughts are momentarily broken. "Come in," I call, and Martha opens my door for the second time today. "I beg your pardon, miss, but there is a gentleman downstairs who's come to call on you." "A gentleman?" I inquire, wondering if this was a wayward mourner who had not come to pay their respects when my sister was lying in state in our drawing room. "He gave me this card, miss," Martha said, and handed me a calling card. The paper is soft under my fingers, and I looked down to read the name that was written there. My heart froze. It was the Baron. My heart is pounding wildly in my chest as I descend the stairs to the drawing room. Why was the Baron here, and so soon? After yesterday's events, I should like to think that he would be embarrassed to even set foot in my house, let alone ask to see me. The thought toughens my resolve, and I press my lips together in a firm line. I will not let him intimidate me this time, I think fiercely. I will not be bullied by a man who might as well have signed my sister's death certificate with his own hands. The door to the drawing room is open, and I take a few calming breaths before striding through. The Baron is there when I enter, dressed handsomely in a dark grey suit and cream-coloured shirt. The cravat at his throat is so red and bright that it catches my eye immediately and makes me think of paint or blood that has been splattered upon his person like the mark of guilt. He had been staring idly out the window before I entered, and when the sound of my dress on the floor reaches his ears, he turns, and I do my best not to flinch, as his piercing eyes find my own, and almost succeed in rooting me to the floor.
"You came down,"
he says, turning fully to look at me, and I can see the effect of his person caught in the weak light of the fading sun. He is so handsome in that moment that I feel a desire to cross the room just to be closer to him. But the memory of last night's encounter with Marianne keeps me exactly where I am, and I do not give in to the urge.
"I wasn't sure if you would want to see me."
Would you have blamed me if I hadn't? I reply, my tone as empty of emotion as I can make it.
"Perhaps not,"
he counters.
"My behavior at your sister's grave yesterday was most deplorable."
Depraved is the word I would use, sir, I retort, and am not the least bit sorry. Mother will be furious if she ever found out I spoke to the Baron in this manner, but my grief mixed with anger has loosened my tongue, and I find that I don't much care what Mother thinks. A small smile creeps across the Baron's face. It is a smile I cannot read, but at least he hasn't tried putting his hands on me like he did yesterday.
"You are very direct, my dear,"
he says, low and soft.
"It is something I admire about you more than I could possibly express. In fact, one could say it was part of the reason I asked you to marry me."
I glance hastily at the door as he says those words. Whether I turned him down or not of my own volition, I still do not want anyone in this house to know that we were engaged, even if it was briefly and under set conditions. Not very many men find that trait as attractive as you do, I reply. He chuckles at my response.
"I am not like most men. But more to the point, I didn't come here to discuss what other men may or may not find desirable in a mate."
Then what did you come here for? I ask, meaning to sound authoritative and proud, but instead I can hear the tiredness in my voice. The anger I felt before I entered the room is starting to slip away, like the sun as it begins to dip low outside the curtains. He is very quiet for a moment, before slowly crossing the room to stand before me, and I can smell the scent of some expensive cologne wafting off his skin. The hints of clove and violet assail my senses, making me take an involuntary step forward. With one gloved hand, the Baron reaches up and brushes a stray lock away from my cheek. I blink and resist the unbelievable urge to lean into his touch.
"I came here to apologize for my behavior yesterday, in the hopes that you can forgive me, and that we might be able to continue our courtship. Please allow me another chance to win your hand, and I promise you will never want for anything. I can help you bear the grief of your sister's death, if only you will allow me such a chance."
His voice has become deeper as he speaks these words to me, and I am conscious of the fact that I should be angry at the mere suggestion that we should ever be anything more than strangers who pass each other on the street and are coolly polite to one another. But the smell of his cologne mixed with something else, a musk of some sort that I can't quite place, is making me feel as if I were back in the Nag's Head, drinking my tankard next to the warm fire. My lips part to tell him no and to please go away and leave my family to be alone in our grief. But what comes out instead is something entirely different. "Yes," I whisper, though my mind is screaming at me to stop speaking at once. I want that very much. I want to be able to forget all about this house and what has happened here and to be with you in a place where no one can touch me or hold me back ever again. The smile that had been creeping across the Baron's face has now become a real smile, but this one I can read. It is a smile of triumph, the kind of smile worn by a man when he knows that he has won some kind of particularly hard battle. He reaches out to touch me again, and I feel the fingers of his gloved hand caress my face. I close my eyes and lean into the texture of the fabric. It is light and cool on my skin, the barest suggestions of what life could be like with this man. The next seconds pass by without me even realizing it, and I am aware of nothing except the fact that the Baron has moved closer to me and has begun kissing me without my consent. His mouth is cold on my own, and though my mind is practically screaming at me to stop this foolishness at once, I find that my lips have parted under his, and there is a roaring in my ears that overpowers anything else. It tells me to give everything I have over to this man, to let him be everything I want him to be, and much more, to let him love me and take me wherever he wants to go. I hear him growl low in his throat as I succumb to the kiss, and he pulls me hard against him with his free hand. The other hand, which has been gently caressing my face before now, has crept up to my hair, and I feel him rake his fingers through it, pulling it half free of its curls and undoing my ribbons. I gasp into his mouth as the force of his desire is something I have never felt before in my life. His hand begins to travel down then, down my throat where my pulse is fluttering like a bird, down to the pearl buttons on my collar where he begins to flick them open one by one. I want to pull back, want to move away from him. Everything is moving too fast, and there is certainly no way I would agree to this were I in my right mind. But my head feels dizzy as the sound of the roaring continues. It is telling me not to resist, to let this happen, that once it's all over, I'll be more of a woman and free to do whatever I want. My knees feel weak, and the ability to stand momentarily fails me. He catches me in his arms as firmly as if I were a doll being clutched in the hands of a greedy child. The buttons on my collar are now fully undone, and the chilliness of the drawing room brushes against the skin of my throat, an exposed collarbone.
So beautiful,
I hear him whisper as he breaks our kiss to stare down at me.
the most beautiful bride I could have ever asked for. It's such a shame what happened to your sister. I wanted her just as much as I want you, and I hope that in time you will learn to forgive me. We will grieve together for her loss, forever and always.
My head, so full of the pounding now that I can barely think, has no idea what he might mean. But the more I try to make sense of his words, the more my mind resists.
Close your eyes.
Says a heavy voice inside my brain.
Close your eyes and let me have what I want.
I do as the voice commands, and my eyes slowly slide shut. There is movement above me, and I feel the collar of my dress being pulled aside, exposing my throat even more. The Baron heaves a satisfied sigh, and his hand begins to travel once more. It flutters across my throat, brushes the tops of my clavicle, then comes to rest on the string of beads around my neck. I hear his sharp intake of breath, and before I know what is happening, the Baron has released me and has moved away. I blink several times, feel the edges of my vision return as if I had just woken from a very powerful dream. The Baron is standing several steps from me, breathing hard, like a man who has just suffered a terrible shock and doesn't quite know how to respond. His face is a mask, white and mildly furious. In my state of partial delirium, it makes me think of a wild animal, like Mary Ann, as I had seen her in the graveyard. The idea sends a cold shiver down my spine as I feel myself regain my own thoughts. My mouth feels dry as I attempt to speak. I don't rightly know what has just taken place between us, sir, but I think I must ask you to leave and never come back here. His breathing has slowed, and he is regarding me carefully, like I was something dangerous.
Yes,
he replies slowly.
I do believe that I have overestimated your condition. That is to say, I hadn't realized that your sister's death had caused such a religious stir in your heart.
I feel my brow furrow in confusion. I'm sure I don't know what you mean, sir, and I ask you once again to please leave us in peace. I accept your apology for having mistreated me yesterday, but will be very wroth with you if I shall have to ask you again to leave us be. He stares at me for a long moment, so long that I can feel my anger returning in full force, a preferable state to the one I had clearly just escaped from.
Yes,
he says again, brusque and to the point, before giving me a little bow and sweeping from the room. At the door he turns and looks at me, as if he would say more, but then thinks better of it and turns away. I hear the sound of the door close as he leaves, and am left standing there for a long while, wondering what has just transpired. Slowly, my hand reaches for the chain around my neck, and I pull out the tiny silver cross. It winks in me at the light of the setting sun, and my mind begins to race with all sorts of unanswered questions. But the most important one of all, that sets itself up the loudest in my mind, is this. Why would something as simple as a cross be cause for alarm for a man like the Baron?